Thank you, sir. All righty. Everyone hear me? I'll take that as a yes. Hi, I'm Aaron Klein. Thanks for coming today. I'm sure you hear it from all the presenters, or at least I've heard it from the ones I've been in the room for. But you know, you guys are all on the cutting edge, all moving this forward and moving blockchain forward, and it's super exciting. And honestly, I'm super appreciative that you came out today and you came out to the conference. I think, I was at I've been at blockchain conferences for a few years now, and consistently watch the content improve, the use cases improve, watch what's going on, and it's very transparent to me that it's folks like you coming to these events, pushing it forward, pushing the technology forward. So with that, as they said, the founder of Blockwatch, and sort of here to talk to you about tips for managing your blockchain. Right? Who am I? And we'll skip through this pretty quickly, right? Worked in the technology industry for a long time and come at it from building with my partner enterprise monitoring solutions for 20 years, right? So building solutions for everything from databases to applications to social media monitoring for enterprises to last cloud, and now looking at blockchain as a new technology, as something new that's going to require monitoring. And we're like I said, we've put together a company with a pretty interesting solution. I'll tell you a little bit about it at the end, but I think more of what you want to hear is really sort of what we're going to cover today, which is what you need to do, right? You've planned it out, you've thought about it, you've put together your project plan, you've hired your people, you've built your first test chain, you've run it through that, you've run it through further development, further refinement, you're out and you're ready in production, you're running in production now. What do I need to think about, right? What's important? And that's what we want to cover today. So maybe a little overview, we'll talk a little bit about continuous monitoring, what's important to monitor, what you should be looking for, right? About secure configurations, how to think about configurations, what's important, what looks like suspicious activity, right? We've talked a lot about blockchain, and blockchains are secure, right? I mean, they have some advantages in security, no doubt about it. But just like the best bank with the best vault, if you leave the vault open, it's not really going to work. And the same thing with blockchain security. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about creating an accessible audit record. Everything's stored on the chain, but that doesn't mean that everything's accessible and usable from an enterprise perspective. So let's jump into it, right? We all know blockchain's a new technology. We all seen it, where we recognize what's coming forward. We recognize the ability and what it brings to the table in terms of data sharing, in terms of business efficiency, right? But what we also know, and history has shown us, that new technologies all require monitoring, right? From an enterprise, you still have security needs. You still have compliance needs. You still need to be responsible about what's going on. And we've seen that with everything from new hardware to applications to databases to clouds. Blockchain is going to be the exact same thing. It's no different. It's no different than the technologies that were before it, and it's no different than what's going to come in the future. For you to successfully implement it in your organization, for you to be responsible in terms of what's going on, you need to understand what's happening. Right? And you're going to need purpose-built tools. You're going to need to really see it. It sounds like we got some real thunder. but you're going to need tools that make it work for you. Right? So how do you gain visibility? How do you do this monitoring? Right? How do you ensure it? And really, you can think about it, and you're going to hear about them. There are open source tools out there. And we're obviously not an open source tool, but we encourage you to look at those. We encourage you to think about those, right? They're tools that help you do the basics. And like you'll hear about Hyperledger Explorer, you'll hear about Caliper, right? Both of which are going to give you some insight into what's going on in your chain. And like I said, if you're not using a purpose-built solution, if you're not using a private solution, you should be using one of these, or you should be building your own, but you should be doing the monitoring, right? And all of these tools that are listed up here, and so whether it's for Hyperledger, whether it's for Ethereum, you want to be, whether you're looking at tools that work on Corda, if you're looking at tools, on other chains, on Data Gumbo, you're going to want something that gives you visibility, gives you continuous monitoring. And really, you're going to focus on these sort of key areas when you think of network monitoring and you think of operations and configuration management. Those are the two areas that you want to look at as you're running your chain, as you're managing your chain. When we talk about network monitoring, right, really just sort of a fancy way of saying understanding what's going on your network, right? Understanding your performance, understanding the relationships of what's going on, and tracking activity, right? Key metrics to think about are things like network size, like bandwidth, transaction speed, things like latency and throughput. Really, you just want really sort of key ideas around this, and these are all important, on the most basic fundamental level of, if you don't have visibility into this, you're not going to know if you're getting the performance you want. You built this chain, you implemented the solution, you signed people up. If you're not following this, you don't know if it's working. And you certainly can't tell if it's working the way that you intended it. And of course, the second piece is the easiest way to identify suspicious behavior is to have a baseline of what normal behavior looks like and to understand what you should be looking for. So this is sort of your first piece of what you should be doing is you should be doing network monitoring. The second piece of what you should be doing is operations and configuration management, right? And this is thinking what permissions, how is it configured, how do pieces interact with each other, and you want to put some thought into how you want them to interact. This is going to evolve. Again, you're starting the chain, you're going to start with 4 nodes and 10 nodes and 20 nodes, and you're going to end up with 1,000 nodes and 2,000 nodes and 10,000 nodes. Your interactions are going to be different, your configurations are going to be different, you're going to have different needs. The other piece of configuration is think about it, there's a trade-off that you're going to be making in this. And that trade-off is going to be speed, right? Sort of efficiency versus security. And depending on what you're using your chain for, depending on what your particular use case is and what data is being there and what's residing on it, you're going to determine how you want to make that trade, right? So when you think about this, you want to think about configuration policies. You want to think about access controls. And I'm going to come back to access controls because that's probably, maybe the 1 or 2 most important things to really look at in the long term. But you're going to look at channel configuration policies. You're going to look at order policies. And of course, you're going to do proactive alerting. All of this, again, is going to help you in your compliance and your security posture. Having these in place allows you to be very comfortable that you've implemented a solution in your organization and you're being responsible about it. So to maintain secure configurations on your chain, right? Whether you're public or private, whatever protocol you're using, whether it's a permissioned or an open chain, although I would push you very hard to think long and hard about using unpermissioned chains in the enterprise space. You still need to understand. You need to have an inventory of what you have, right? You can't secure what you don't know. If you don't know you have a door there, you can't lock it. You can't monitor it. So really, you need to know your nodes. You need to understand what's in your environment. You need to map out what you expect to happen, map out how things interact, who owns what, right? Understand what your access controls of those nodes are so that you understand how they're interacting. And then, right, after you understand your inventory, after you understand your environment, you want to set alerts for important activities. And you'll be able to define what those are, right, depending on your use case. It could be transaction volume. It could be a group of nodes transaction volume. It could be size. It could be failure rates. It could be error rates. It could be any number of factors. But you want to make sure that you're proactively alerting on these things and that you're looking after what's going on. Right? And sort of moving on to identifying and then mitigating suspicious behavior. Right? And there are a lot of things that could indicate a security concern. There are a lot of different factors. There's not one, oh my God, this is it. But again, understanding your inventory, understanding how your pieces interact, that will enable you to identify what looks suspicious, right? And that will identify what you should investigate. Really, sort of maybe the two most important topics from this, and the two most important topics from this perspective are access controls. How are they set? Have they changed? And an increase in failure rates and error rates, failed transactions. So access controls are really, again, a fancy way of saying who we allow to do what, right? And how we have it set up and how we have the chain set up. So this from a security perspective is the single most important thing you can do, right? You want to control who can access what on your chain, who can see what information, and you want to continually update it because you're going to be adding users, you're going to be adding nodes, you're going to be dropping people, you're going to be changing what data is there, and you may be adding fields and what's in your blocks itself, all of which requires updates. If somebody hacks into your chain, the first thing they're going to do is give themselves unlimited permissions. That's going to be a key hacker maneuver. So you're going to see access controls change, and it's not going to be a permissioned reason, right? So you need to understand what you have, and you need to understand what changed. I got a little emphasis of thunder behind me, apparently. So the next thing you're going to look for is increase in failed transactions, right? And there are common errors for completely innocent reasons. It's not every time you see an increase, I don't want you thinking, oh my God, somebody's attacking me. Oh my God, someone's in my network, right? Like that's the wrong response. But the right response is to say, hey, I expect X and I see Y and I'm going to look into it, right? They could be consensus errors. It could be validation logic errors. It could be syntax errors. But understand why, understand where it's coming from, right? And one of the things that you want your tool to do, right, and one of the things that you're going to struggle with, say, an open source tool, is filtering the noise out of it, right? You're going to assign people whose job it is to look for these things, right, to look for access controls, to look for errors, and they're going to receive a tremendous amount of data and a tremendous amount of noise. And what you want is to filter it out because, look, having no visibility doesn't work for you. But if you get 10,000 alerts in a day, you may as well have gotten 0 because your people aren't going to be able to go through them. There's no, they're going to just start ignoring. So, you want to think about what you're looking for, and you want to think about an intelligent way to look for it. So really, right, how do you mitigate it, and what do you think about it? I wish there was one answer. I wish there was just a simple, hey, all you got to do is A, B, and C, but it's ongoing, right? Attackers and malicious actors are going to continue to evolve, and so what you need to do is to stay on top of sort of what you're thinking about, right? You need to invest resources. You need to organize, you need to truly have visibility into what your inventory looks like, what your environment looks like, what your configurations look like. And you need to do that ongoing, right? Again, look, I'm up here because I want to sell you a tool. That's my job. But don't buy our tool, at least set something up. Because ultimately, you have to do it one way or the other way, right? And the last piece of what you want to do when you're running a chain is really you want to create an accessible audit record, right? And folks are going to tell you, hey, all the data is stored on the chain. And it is. Everything's stored on the chain. But that doesn't mean that if an auditor comes to you and says, hey, I want to see all transactions that fit parameters X and Y from March 15th to March 30th, you can get it for them. Or it doesn't mean that if you have a problem in your chain and you need to track it back, you can just grab it, right? Like that's all well and good to sort of say that and have it sit and try to find it later that day. But if you haven't organized your data, if you haven't thought about what you need and what you want to collect, right, it's going to take you not hours, not even days, it's going to take you weeks to go back and find it. And you just can't be doing that at a time where you have a problem and you need to track back and solve that problem, right? You need to understand where that weakness is and where it came from and how to prevent it. And you need to be able to do that in an effective way, an efficient way. And simultaneously, when auditors come, when you're fulfilling your Sarbanes-Oxley or your PCI compliance or this isn't a HIPAA crowd, but a HIPAA compliance or an 853 controls, they're not going to want to hear, we'll get it back to you in 3.5 weeks, right? That's not an audit record. So you need to think about what you need and what you're collecting, and you want to collect it and organize it now. And so that's really, so you're in production. This is what we'll push you to think about, right? We do this, as for business, right? We built a software tool that does this. There are open source tools out there, and I'd encourage you to look at both. But really, if I have, one thing to say is that ultimately, you gotta monitor what's going on, right? Like that's your responsibility. So, and it looks like I am out of time. If you have questions, we are right outside the door. Adam in the front is one of the guys, and there are a few others who will be happy to talk to you, and I'll be around, and appreciate your time and appreciate you listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.